Hi, I'm Scoot, and welcome to Scoot on the Air YouTube channel. I've been doing a series of stories. It's really kind of the backstory behind the story and the lives of celebrities and rockers in particular. Sometimes there's an interesting backstory behind this. I started doing this with Marvin Gaye, the real story behind the shooting of Marvin Gaye, shot by his dad a day before his birthday in his own home. Really shot and killed by his own dad. Had to be a story there. There was. And so I'm continuing this on my radio show on WWL and then also here on my YouTube channel. And you can also find the printed version of this among the blogs that I write. And you can find that on the WWL website, WWL.com. And go to the left, click on shows, and then move over to the right, click on Scoot, and all the posts are there. And these are all the blogs that I write, so it's included there as well. But I also want to share this with you on the YouTube channel. Then we did Kurt Cobain. Was it suicide or was it murder? And then Elvis Presley. Elvis was a little bit of a creep. I mean, he was kind of perverted. He liked really young girls, and that was his whole infatuation with his wife Priscilla. So we went to investigate some of the real story of that. So I want to talk about the real story behind the shooting death of Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was an iconic R&B singer in the 50s and 60s. And between 1957 and 1964, Sam Cooke had a string of hits. You'll recognize some of these names. You Send Me, A Change Is Gonna Come, which was really part of the civil rights movement. It became an anthem for the civil rights movement. A Wonderful World, Chain Gang, Cupid, and Bring It On Home to Me. These were just some of the Sam Cooke hits. He did two songs that were so popular. Other performers did them as covers, and they became hits for these other performers. Rod Stewart covered Sam Cooke's Twistin' the Night Away, and that was a big hit for Rod Stewart in 1973. And Cat Stevens, now known as Yusef, because he switched to Islam, converted to Islam, he had a hit in 1974 on the Sam Cooke hit Another Saturday Night. So Sam Cooke was very inspirational and very influential, not only musically, but also as far as the civil rights movement was concerned. Now, it's really impossible to ignore how popular Sam Cooke was when he was killed in 1964. And so on my radio show, I've always, on the anniversary of Sam Cooke's death, I've always said, oh, this is the day it was a December day. This is the day in 1964 that R&B legend Sam Cooke was killed. He was shot by a night manager in a motel in Los Angeles. Come on, there's got to be a story there. This guy is like on top of the world musically, and he's shot by an assistant manager at a motel in LA. Got to be a story there. So I looked into this. So Sam Cooke, here he is on really at the top of the music world, and he's shot by this night manager after bringing a young woman to this motel. The police investigate. It's ruled a justifiable homicide. But was it? Sam Cooke was 33 years old in 1964. And his music was continuing to shoot up the charts. He was on the verge of really becoming a major crossover star. He was a producer, a writer. He was huge, had his own record label. Sam Cooke was as big as you can be in 1964. Now that's the year the Beatles came out, 1964. That's the year the Beatles hit America. And so here it was in December of 64. Sam Cooke is on top of the world in his world, about to really make a big crossover into just mainstream. And he's shot and killed by this night manager at a motel. So Sam Cooke was having dinner. Here's the story. Sam Cooke was having dinner with his producer and his wife. They were having dinner, occasionally interrupted because fans came over to say hi to Sam Cooke and tell him how great he was and how much they loved his music. At one point, Sam is pulled away from the table and he ends up at the bar and he's buying drinks for some people in the bar and some of the people he knows because they're in the music industry. While he's at the bar, a 22-year-old Asian girl catches Sam Cooke's attention. Sam was quite a ladies' man. Now, she was sitting in a booth with three men. Sam Cooke knew one of the men because he played music with him. He was a guitar player. And so that guy introduced Sam Cooke to Elisa Boyer, the Asian girl. It wasn't long before Sam Cooke and Elisa were snuggling up in a different booth. Now, Sam Cooke and the Asian girl, Boyer, left the restaurant about 1 a.m. They got in Sam Cooke's brand new red Ferrari and they drove to a nightclub where they were supposed to meet Sam Cooke's producer and Sam Cooke's producer's wife, who he was having dinner with. They were supposed to meet them at the nightclub. Well, at the nightclub, Sam Cooke got into a verbal confrontation with a guy who he thought was hitting on his Asian friend. And it got to the point where then she asked Sam Cooke to take her home. So they left that nightclub at 2 a.m. Now, according to this girl's story to police, Sam Cooke ignored her request to take her home. He got on the freeway and then, not long after that, got off the freeway and pulled into the Hacienda Motel near LAX. He stopped at the manager's office, got out to register. Now, the Asian girl stayed in the Ferrari. Now, remember that because that's going to be important in a few minutes. So Sam Cooke goes in to register. The night manager notices there's a girl in the car. Now, look, this was 1964. And the night manager says, you're going to have to register as Mr. and Mrs. So Sam Cooke does. He registers as Mr. and Mrs. Sam Cooke. Another thing that's going to be important shortly. Now, after registering, Sam Cooke pulls the Ferrari around to a back section of the motel where the hotel room is. The motel room is. This is a motel where the motel room is. It's the Hacienda Motel in LA. And she tells police that Sam Cooke pushes her into the room and down on the bed, and he starts ripping off her clothes. At that point, she said, I knew he was going to rape me. She manages to excuse herself to go to the bathroom. She's trying to lock the door on the bathroom, but the lock is broken. She checks the window to try to get out of the window. She says the window is sealed shut because it was recently painted. So when she comes out of the bathroom, she says Sam Cooke is totally naked. And he starts groping her. And then at some point, Sam Cooke excuses himself to go to the bathroom. While he's in the bathroom, she grabs her clothes and runs out of the hotel room wearing only her slip and her bra. She bangs on the night manager's door, the office. No answer. She sees a payphone. You know, we used to have those. She sees the payphone and she immediately calls the police. Meanwhile, Sam Cooke comes out of the bathroom, does not see her in the room, and panics. He's freaking out. Gets in his Ferrari, drives to the front, looking for this girl. He went to the manager's door. He's pounding on the door and saying, "Is the girl in there?" The night manager, Bertha Franklin, says no. The door to her office was locked. Sam Cooke begins to lunge his shoulder against the door, trying to break in. And at some point, the door frame eventually gives way, and Sam Cooke ends up in the office confronting the night manager, Bertha Franklin. And he says, "Where's the girl?" That was followed by a physical altercation between Sam Cooke and Bertha Franklin. Franklin told police that he fell on top of her. In order to get him off of her, she bites him and tries to scratch him. At some point, she's able to kick Sam Cooke, and that gives her enough of a break to run over and grab a gun, which is not far away. She grabs the gun, she comes back, and she shoots Sam Cooke 3 times. By the time police arrive, this R&B legend is dead. Tests revealed that at the time of his death, Sam Cooke's blood alcohol level was 0.16. 0.08 is the legal limit for drinking and driving. You're considered legally drunk at 0.08. He was 0.16. Sam Cooke's credit cards were gone, but $108 in cash was still on him. Police investigated. They ruled it a justifiable homicide, and the case was closed. But according to the website performingsongwriter.com, there were some problems with the story of the Asian girl and the night manager at the motel. The girl testified that she did not meet Sam Cooke. Well, they didn't. She says that they met Sam Cooke. She met Sam Cooke at a dinner party, but did not mention the nightclub. She also claims she was kidnapped by Sam Cooke. But remember when he went to check in and she remained in the Ferrari? Why didn't she run? If she was being kidnapped, why didn't she try to escape? And if she went to the front office and if she found a payphone, then the payphone was by the front office. Why didn't she jump out and try and find the payphone and call the police at that point if she was really being kidnapped? So I guess the other thing to remember is if Sam Cooke, if his goal was to go to this motel and rape this girl, which is what she claims, why did he register under his real name? Interestingly, about a month after the shooting of Sam Cooke, the girl, Elisa Boyer, was arrested in Hollywood on a charge of prostitution. It was also learned that the Hacienda motel offered a $3 per hour rate at night. So in other words, you stayed all night, they're losing money. $3 an hour for the room. So they were catering to prostitutes. At this point, it seems possible that Sam Cooke, who was known for enjoying the services of prostitutes, might have paid for the Asian girl's services, paid for sex with her that night, took her to the motel. In 1979, this Asian girl was found guilty of second-degree murder of her boyfriend. Bertha Franklin, the motel night manager, was actually a madam with a criminal record. She ultimately left her job at the motel. She sued the Cooke estate for $200,000 for punitive damages and injuries, but she lost. But the story doesn't end there. Sam Cooke's wife, Barbara Cooke, was well aware of her husband's infidelity, his cheating, his love of prostitutes. She was actually having an affair with a bartender at a local bar. In fact, the day of Sam Cooke's funeral, the bartender she was having an affair with was reportedly wearing Sam Cooke's watch and ring. Barbara Cooke soon broke off her relationship with the bartender and married one of Sam Cooke's backup singers, Bobby Womack, another prominent R&B name. Bobby Womack went on to be a solo star in his own right. Bobby Womack was an R&B star. 77 days after Sam Cooke's death, Bobby Womack and Barbara Cooke were married in Los Angeles at a courthouse, and Bobby Womack actually wore one of Sam Cooke's suits for the wedding ceremony. Some had observed that Sam Cooke had developed a massive ego and that it was growing out of control. He was known as a drug user. He liked prostitutes. It was also suggested that his wife Barbara was insanely jealous and she might have set up the shooting, that this might have been a planned murder of her husband. Others believe that Sam Cooke's shooting death was racially motivated because Sam Cooke was becoming so big, gaining so much power, that as a black artist, he was a threat to people. Now, what really happened in this tragic shooting in December of 1964, I mean, we're never going to know because the people who were directly involved are now dead. But over the years, I've always, marked the anniversary of Sam Cooke's death by saying he was killed by the night manager of the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles. And I just left it at that. But in thinking about it, it's like, wait a minute, there's got to be a story here. So really, this is a fascinating story. And it seems like it really was possible that Sam Cooke was set up and that he was murdered. And really, between 1957 and 1964, he had become as big a star as you could become in the R&B world. And also became a civil rights activist. So maybe there was more to it than he meets this girl, brings her to the hotel, tries to rape her, kidnaps her, tries to rape her, and then gets shot by the night manager who's acting in self-defense. Maybe it didn't happen that way. So that's the real story. In fact, on my radio show today, when I talked about this, a gentleman called and said that his uncle actually sang with Sam Cooke in Sam Cooke's gospel group, which was before 1957 and the hit You Send Me came out. Sam Cooke was touring with a gospel group. And he said that his uncle came home shortly after Sam Cooke died and told the same story that I just told about how it was probably a setup, that Sam Cooke was probably murdered in a setup killing. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll be doing another real story behind the life of some celebrity or some rocker. Thank you for joining me here on Scoot on the Air YouTube. We will continue to evolve this YouTube channel with graphics and stuff as time goes on. I would appreciate it if you would become a subscriber. And if you subscribe, it's free. We'll let you know as soon as we do something new. Thank you for being with me on Scoot on the Air YouTube.